You can see, and this is one of the more important things. You see this right here? You see this right here? This is Caitlin's agent. This is Caitlin Clark's agent.
Pause for a second. Look at this image. Don't look at the jerseys. Don't look at the arena lights. Don't look at Caitlin Clark herself. Look at the person standing next to her. That man right there in that tunnel at the Barclays Center is Aaron Kane, Caitlin Clark's agent. And I want you to understand something before we go any further. Agents of his caliber do not show up in viral post-game footage by accident. That appearance was calculated. Every single detail of it was deliberate. What you just watched wasn't a player catching up with some friends after a game. What you watched was the opening move of one of the most sophisticated power plays in the history of women's professional basketball. And today, we're going to break it all down, step by step, piece by piece, because the mainstream sports media is either too distracted or too unincentivized to connect these dots for you. That's what we do here at Simply Explained. Let's get into it. To understand why any of this is happening, you have to start at the foundation. And the foundation right now has some very visible cracks in it. Caitlin Clark has missed 10 games this season, 5 due to a left quad injury, 5 more because of a groin issue. Now injuries happen. Every athlete deals with them. That's not the story. The story is what happened around those injuries, specifically what was said publicly about them. After Clark went down with her most recent groin issue, head coach Stephanie White spoke to reporters. And in describing the moment Clark felt discomfort on the bench, she used language that raised eyebrows across the league, language that felt clinical in all the wrong ways. Detached, almost dismissive of the severity of what her player was going through. Now, words matter, especially in professional sports. When a coach speaks about their franchise players' physical health in a way that feels careless, even if it was unintentional, it plants a seed. Not just in the minds of fans and analysts, but in the mind of the player herself. And if you're Caitlin Clark sitting on that bench, physically hurting and emotionally vulnerable, and you hear your coach describe your pain in those terms to a room full of reporters, that's not something you forget. But the injury management isn't even the most damaging crack. The more destructive issue is the philosophical one. Caitlin Clark at some point this season made a statement that was remarkably clear. She didn't complain. She didn't throw anybody under the bus. She simply articulated what makes her effective as a basketball player. She said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that she needs the ball in her hands in transition. That there is a fine line between being used as a true ball-dominant playmaker and being deployed as an off-ball player. And that when she's operating in space, running the break, making decisions at full speed, that is when she is at her absolute best. That is not a diva having a meltdown. That is a generational talent explaining with precision the conditions under which she performs at the highest level. Most coaches would consider that a gift. Clear communication from your best player about how to maximize their impact. That's exactly what you want. So how did the coaching staff respond? Stephanie White made it known, repeatedly, in various interviews, that she values having 2 primary ball handlers on the floor simultaneously. She also expressed concern about Clark playing under full court pressure for extended stretches. Let me be direct about what that means in practice. Your franchise player, the player who sells out every arena she walks into, the player who has done more for WNBA television ratings than arguably anyone in the league's history, tells you she's most dangerous in transition with the ball in her hands. Your response is to deploy a system that limits exactly that. That is not a minor tactical disagreement. That is a fundamental misalignment between a coach's philosophy and a superstar's actual skill set. And when that kind of disconnect becomes public, when it filters through press conferences and post-practice media sessions and becomes part of the narrative surrounding your team, it stops being an internal issue. It becomes a story, and stories have consequences. Now let's go back to that image. Aaron Kane is not just any sports agent. He operates at the very highest level of athlete representation. The clients he manages are not athletes looking for their next deal. They are cultural figures who understand that their leverage extends far beyond what happens on the court. When a player like Caitlin Clark starts feeling misunderstood, mismanaged, or simply undervalued by her organization, there is a process that unfolds. It's not a dramatic locker room confrontation. It's not a leaked trade request. It starts quietly. Conversations happen. A pattern gets established. And eventually, a very specific kind of meeting takes place. The tunnel at the Barclays Center following a game against the New York Liberty was that kind of meeting. Clark was photographed in conversation with Sandy Brondello, the Liberty's head coach, with Sabrina Ionescu, with Brina Stewart, two of the most decorated players in the league, and right there in that frame, visible and unmistakable, was Aaron Kane. Now you might say, maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe they were all just in the same place at the same time. Here's what I'll tell you. In professional sports at this level, agents do not wander into post-game tunnel footage by coincidence. Every single appearance in a public setting, especially one that gets captured on camera and immediately goes viral, is considered. These are professionals who understand optics as well as any political strategist. The message that image sent was targeted directly at one audience, the Indiana Fever front office. It said, "We have options, and we are not afraid to let you see us exploring them." Here's where most analysts stop. They see the tunnel photo, they speculate about a trade, they debate whether Clark is happy or unhappy, and then they move on. But if you want to understand what Aaron Kane is actually doing, you have to understand the instrument he's playing. It is not a trade demand. It is the collective bargaining agreement. For anyone unfamiliar, the CBA is essentially the constitution of professional sports. It is the master agreement negotiated between the players' union and the league that governs everything: salaries, contract lengths, trade procedures, free agency timelines, benefits, player rights, all of it. And here is the critical piece of information that you need to hold on to. The WNBA and its players recently opted out of the existing CBA. They are currently, right now, as this video goes live, in the middle of negotiating an entirely new one. Every rule that governs player movement, every mechanism that determines how much leverage a team has over a player's future, every clause that defines when and how an athlete can control her own career path, all of it is currently on the table. And Aaron Kane, one of the most influential agents in the game, is deeply embedded in that process. Now let's think about this with some depth. A lot of people look at Caitlin Clark's situation and say, she can't go anywhere, she's on a rookie deal. She doesn't hit free agency until 2028. And even then, she'd be a restricted free agent, meaning Indiana can match any offer she receives. Those people are right, on paper. But they're thinking about this the wrong way. They're thinking about a single player trying to force a single trade. That is checkers. What Aaron Kane appears to be doing is he is not trying to get Caitlin Clark traded to the New York Liberty in 2025. That's not the objective, at least not right now. The objective is to change the board itself, to alter the rules of the game so that when Clark's future is eventually decided, the framework that governs that decision is dramatically more favorable to the player than it is today. Think about what that looks like in practice. If you're negotiating a new CBA on behalf of the players' union, and your most prominent client, the most commercially valuable player in the league's history, is publicly and visibly unhappy with her team, that is leverage. Real, tangible leverage. You go into those negotiations and you argue that the current system is broken. You point to Clark's situation as evidence. You push for shorter, restricted free agency windows. You advocate for mechanisms that allow players to express destination preferences earlier in their careers. You push for trade request frameworks that give athletes more agency. And the league has a problem, because the league cannot afford for Caitlin Clark to become the face of player exploitation in women's basketball. The optics of that would be catastrophic. So you negotiate. And the outcome, the new CBA that gets ratified, looks a little more like what the players wanted. Not because the union had more lawyers, but because the most famous player in the game was making the power imbalance visible in real time. That is the leverage play, and it is extraordinarily sophisticated. Now add this to everything we've just discussed. According to reporting from people inside the league's operations, approximately 87.5% of the current WNBA All-Stars are projected to reach unrestricted free agency by 2026. Let that sit for a moment. Nearly 9 out of every 10 All-Star caliber players in the league free agents simultaneously. No matching rights, no team controls, just open market full player autonomy. That is not a shift in competitive balance, that is a full restructuring. In a matter of weeks, if the projections hold, the entire map of the WNBA could be redrawn, dynasties built, rosters decimated, teams that were contenders becoming rebuilding projects overnight. Now look at the timing of what Clark and Kane are doing. They are not reacting to this tidal wave. They are moving ahead of it. While other players and agents are waiting to see what happens, Kane is already positioning, both within CBA negotiations and in the public narrative, to ensure that when 2026 arrives, the framework governing all of those free agent decisions is as player-friendly as possible. Every single one of those all-stars about to hit the open market is watching how Caitlin Clark's situation plays out. Every agent representing those players is watching how Aaron Kane operates. If he succeeds, if he manages to shift CBA terms in ways that expand player mobility, those 2026 free agents benefit from what he does right now. Clark's situation isn't a standalone drama. It is a test case, a proof of concept. The first domino in what could be the most significant restructuring of power in WNBA history. All right, let's put the whole picture together. Step 1, make the conflict visible. The tunnel photograph was not a mistake. It was a carefully executed visual statement, designed to go viral, designed to generate conversation, designed to force the Indiana Fever front office into a defensive posture. The moment that image spread across social media, the narrative was established. Caitlin Clark is unhappy and she is not hiding it. Mission accomplished. Indiana's staff immediately began commenting publicly, clarifying, defending. That defensive posture is exactly what Kane wanted. It shifts the power dynamic. Step 2, use the conflict as leverage in the CBA behind closed doors, in negotiating rooms that no camera will ever capture. The players' union is using Clark's public situation as evidence that the current system produces outcomes that are bad for players. The argument writes itself. The league's most important player is trapped in a situation that doesn't serve her development, her health management preferences, or her on-court optimization, and the existing CBA gives her no meaningful recourse. Push for better rules. Push for earlier player mobility windows. Push for frameworks that give stars a voice before their contract expires. The league has to listen, because the alternative is a PR disaster involving the most recognizable face in women's sports. Indiana is now in an impossible position. If they continue the current trajectory, the philosophical misalignment, the injury communication issues, the sense that Clark's input isn't being incorporated, they risk a complete breakdown of the relationship. That story, playing out over months and years, is devastating for the franchise. Their best option is to fundamentally change course. Give Clark more input into how she is used, demonstrate responsibly handling her health, close the gap between her stated needs and the coaching philosophy. Because the alternative is that by the time her contract situation arrives, the narrative is already written, and it is not favorable to Indiana. The Fever are not just managing a roster decision. They are managing a public relations reality that Kane helped engineer. Here is what I want you to take away from all of this. This story is not really about whether Caitlin Clark plays for the Indiana Fever or the New York Liberty. It is about something much larger than that. It is about the moment when the WNBA transitions from a league where teams hold most of the power to a league where elite players begin to control their own narratives and their own futures. It is about the mechanisms, legal, public-facing, CBA-based, through which that transition happens. And it is happening right now, in real time, in tunnel photographs and coaching press conferences and CBA negotiating rooms. Aaron Kane is not just representing one player. He is potentially rewriting the playbook for how elite women's basketball players exercise power. If he pulls this off, if the new CBA reflects even a fraction of the mobility improvements that players are pushing for, then every superstar who comes after Caitlin Clark will operate in a fundamentally different landscape than the one that exists today. That is the magnitude of what we're watching. So the question I'll leave you with is this. Is this a brilliant long-game strategy, one that will ultimately benefit not just Clark but an entire generation of WNBA players? Or is it a high-risk gamble that could backfire, damaging Clark's relationship with her team, destabilizing her on-court performance, and producing outcomes nobody intended? Drop your take in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think. If you found this breakdown valuable, if we connected dots here that you haven't seen connected elsewhere, the subscribe button is right there. Turn on notifications. Because this story is far from over, and when the next move happens, we're going to be the ones explaining it clearly. That's what we do here. Simply explained. See you in the next one.